Welcome to the dark side of love. It's not the honeymoon photographs. It's not the anniversary toasts or the promises whispered in bed. It's what happens after the smiles fade, when the vows stay on paper, but not in touch. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a story that doesn't feel like a story at all, because it's true. It's about how a marriage can starve to death without anyone ever raising their voice, how desire can slip in through the smallest cracks between polite smiles, between errands, between folded towels, and how one touch can turn into something you never meant to happen. But can't make yourself regret. If you think you'd never cross that line, stay, because the line doesn't look like a line until you've already stepped over it. Chapter 1. The laundry room. His hands were under my shirt before I even realized we were that close. The dryer hummed behind me, low and steady, like it had been waiting for this moment longer than I had. The vibration ran up my spine and into the base of my neck, making every nerve pay attention. The air was heavy, with fabric softener, warm, sweet, familiar. The smell of comfort, the smell of lies. He didn't speak, didn't ask. He just moved into my space like he belonged there, his mouth finding the hollow of my collarbone. His breath was warm, dragging across skin that had almost forgotten what it was like to be wanted. I hadn't been touched like that in years, and the truth, I'd stopped expecting to be. The room was dim, the only light coming from an old yellow bulb overhead that flickered every so often, like it was trying to warn me. I kept one hand braced behind me on the folding table, my fingers clamping the edge like maybe it could keep me steady, keep me from sliding into the version of myself I used to be afraid of. But he pressed into my hips, slow at first, then deeper, and I gasped. Every inch of him filled something inside me that had been hollow for so long I'd started thinking it was permanent. My knee nudged an open detergent bottle. It rocked once, twice, but didn't fall. I couldn't move to steady it. I could barely breathe. His hand was firm on my lower back, guiding me like he already knew the path. The dryer rattled again, louder this time. I swallowed a sound, not of pain, but of something I wasn't ready to name. It stung, yes, but I didn't want him to stop. I leaned back harder, pressing into him. I'd gone years without being touched, and then just like that I'd let this happen. I was 39, married, exhausted in a way you can't explain without sounding ungrateful. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of sleep. It comes from being looked at every day, without really being seen. Chapter 2. The man I shouldn't have wanted. He was 31, not a stranger. That would have made more sense. No, he was my husband's coworker, the man who first came over to help patch drywall after a leak in our ceiling, then again to install shelves in the laundry room, and then again, just to say hi. And I knew exactly what I was doing the day I put on that fitted shirt, the one that clings to my waist when I reach up. I told myself it was hot outside, that was why I chose it. But the truth, it wasn't hot. It wasn't the weather that made me wear it. I used to think loneliness was quiet, that it crept in slowly and sat in the corner, waiting for you to notice. But I was wrong. Loneliness has a heartbeat. It pounds in your ears when someone finally places their hand on your lower back and doesn't pull it away. So what would you do if the only comfort you'd felt in years came from the one person you were never supposed to feel that way about? It didn't happen suddenly. It wasn't some wild, reckless moment out of nowhere. It was slow, a drip feed of glances and almost touches, his fingers brushing mine when he passed me a screwdriver. The way he looked at me, not like I was his buddy's wife, but like I was a secret worth keeping. The first time we got too close, it wasn't planned. We didn't kiss. We didn't even speak. I turned too fast, bumped into him, and I didn't step back. There's always that 1 second right before something happens when you could still stop it, and I didn't. I let him press into me, let his hand slide down the back of my jeans like he'd done it before. I let the air between us thicken, and in that laundry room, under that flickering bulb, with the steady hum of a machine that never questioned me, I did the one thing I swore I'd never do. I let go. Chapter 3. The slow burnt morning after that first time I stood at the same folding table, the same one he had pressed me into just hours earlier, and smoothed the edges of freshly washed towels. My husband was in the living room, laughing at some YouTube video, his voice rising in that oblivious, trusting way that made my stomach tighten. I folded each towel perfectly, edges sharp, corners neat, like maybe I could erase what had happened if I ironed enough precision into the fabric. I wasn't supposed to feel guilty. not because it wasn't wrong it was, but because it didn't feel like cheating. It felt like responding to years of silence, of absence, of being treated like a fixture instead of a woman. He had barely touched me in months, not out of anger, not out of resentment, just in the slow forgetting that happens when two people live together long enough to stop noticing each other. That's the thing about marriage: when it starts dying, it doesn't scream. It just goes quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you forget you ever had a voice. Chapter 4: How he started to Materi met Ryan at a company cookout 2 years ago. He was younger, but not boyish. The kind of man who'd already grown into his confidence enough to be a little cocky, but not enough to be careless. He was the type who stayed after everyone else had gone, helping clean up, carrying heavy boxes, fixing things nobody asked him to fix. He wasn't flirtatious, not in the obvious way, but he looked at me like I wasn't invisible, and that alone was dangerous. He came around more after my husband tore his rotator cuff, said he'd help with the heavy lifting. I offered him iced tea on hot days. He always said thank you in a way that lingered. He didn't stare, he scanned, like he was learning me, and I let him. There's one day I remember vividly, long before anything happened. I was in the garage, struggling to lift a box of old Christmas decorations. He walked in without knocking, took it from my hands without asking. Our fingers brushed, nothing dramatic, but my chest stayed tight for the next hour. That's how it started, not with lust, with attention. You don't realize how touch-starved you are until someone grazes your shoulder, and your eyes sting. I kept telling myself I was imagining it. The way he paused in conversation, the way he waited until we were alone to make certain jokes, the way he made those jokes sound like they meant something more. Then came the afternoon. That changed everything. The washer had stopped mid-cycle. My husband was at a conference, so I called Ryan. He showed up 30 minutes later, no tools, just a grin and a shrug. Probably nothing, he said. Just a loose connection. But he didn't go straight to the machine. He lingered in the doorway, watching me wipe my hands on a dish towel. The silence between us was tight, the kind of silence that hangs right before something breaks. I should have handed him the instruction manual and walked away. Instead, I offered coffee. We sat at the counter, talking about nothing: the weather, his terrible landlord, my garden that never grew right. But the words weren't the point. The point was that neither of us wanted the moment to end. When he reached for the sugar, his fingers grazed mine. I didn't flinch. He looked at me for too long. I didn't look away. I'd always believed I was the type of woman who would never, and suddenly, I wasn't so sure. Do you know what it's like to be seen not as a mother, not as a wife, but as a woman who still wants, still aches, still breathes? You either run from it, or you inch closer. And I didn't run. We didn't touch again that day, but something shifted. The silence got louder. The air between us felt heavier. He started fixing things that didn't need fixing. I started leaving the side door unlocked. There's a loneliness that lives in a home like mine, a quiet, polite one, the kind you decorate with throw pillows and scented candles so no one notices it's there. When someone new steps into that space, it doesn't take much for the whole foundation to start shaking. I didn't want Ryan, not at first. I wanted to feel something, and when I finally did, I couldn't pretend it didn't matter. It was a Tuesday when I realized I had memorized the sound of his footsteps. I was upstairs folding laundry again when I heard the side door click open. My husband had taken the truck to the dealership. Ryan had promised to swing by to check the garage door, which had been sticking. It didn't need fixing, but I let him come anyway. I paused in the hallway, clutching a damp bath towel like it was armor. I heard him close the door softly, the way someone does when they know they don't fully belong. My breath caught. I didn't call out. I listened. Each step he took across the tile felt like it was coming straight toward me, and it wasn't suspense. I felt. It was something worse: expectation. I moved down the stairs, slow, quiet, like I was walking into something I couldn't walk back from. He was bent over the garage door panel, sleeves pushed up, forearms dusted in grime. He looked up at me once, didn't speak. I handed him a towel. Our fingers brushed again. I think about that moment more than I should. We stayed like that, him fiddling with screws, me leaning against the wall for minutes, without saying a word. Finally, he stood. I think it's just the track, he said. Could be warped from the heat. There was a smudge of grease above his eyebrow. I almost reached to wipe it away. Almost. Then, movement upstairs, a soft thud. From the bedroom. My husband was home. We stepped apart instantly, like guilty teenagers caught behind the gym. I'll come back later, Ryan said. No rush. And he left before I could answer. That was the moment it became dangerous, not because something happened, but because it didn't. Because now there was something between us, something neither of us was ready to let go of. Chapter 5. The heat that wouldn't fade. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Ryan had looked at me before. My husband came home. Not lust exactly. Not sweetness either. It was hunger. The quiet kind that doesn't need to announce itself, because it knows you feel it too. The following Thursday, he came back to finish the garage door repair. It was late afternoon, the sky soft and gold, shadows stretching long across the driveway. I'd spent the whole day pretending I wasn't waiting for him, pretending I wasn't checking the clock every 20 minutes. When he finally knocked soft, deliberate, I felt it in my chest before I felt it in my ears. He didn't stand in the doorway like a guest. He stepped inside like he belonged there. Door's fine now, he said after barely glancing at it. Just needed some oil. I could smell him sweat soap, a hint of something sharp like cedar. I wanted to step back, but my feet didn't listen. We were alone in the kitchen when it happened. I was rinsing a coffee cup, my back to him. He moved closer, not enough to touch, just enough that I could feel his breath on my neck. You missed a spot, he murmured, reaching past me to take the cup. His fingers brushed my wrist. I froze. He didn't move away. The hum of the refrigerator was suddenly deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Ryan, I whispered, but I didn't finish the sentence, because I didn't know if I was warning him or inviting him. He set the cup down, and then, slowly, so slowly it was like he was giving me time to run. He let his hand graze my hip, not a grab, not a claim, just a test. I didn't move. That was the answer he needed. I don't remember leaning back against him. I just remember the way his body fit against mine like it had been there before. His hand rested on my waist, warm, steady. His breath found my ear. Tell me to stop, he said, voice low, but we both knew I wouldn't. For a moment, we didn't move at all. The air between us thickened, heavy with the things we hadn't said for weeks. My pulse felt like it was everywhere, my throat, my wrists, the tips of my fingers. When he finally stepped back, it was like the floor dropped out from under me. He didn't touch me again that day. Didn't have to, because now we both knew something had shifted, and it wasn't going back. Chapter 6. When he started to haunt me after that, every ordinary moment became unbearable. The sound of his truck in the driveway, the way his voice dropped when he said my name, even the scent of cedar on my laundry from the one time he'd carried my firewood inside. He wasn't just in my head, he was under my skin. I started timing my errands around when I knew he might be home, lingering outside longer when I saw him in the yard, letting conversations stretch past the point of necessity. And he never pushed, which made it worse, because restraint is its own kind of seduction. Then came the day I couldn't hold the line anymore. It was raining hard, relentless. I was in the laundry room, folding sheets, the smell of fabric softener thick in the air. My husband had left for an overnight trip with his coworkers. I told myself I'd spend the evening cleaning, maybe watching a movie alone, but then the side door opened. Power's out at my place, Ryan said, stepping inside, shaking water from his hair. Mind if I wait out the storm here? The truth was, I minded, because I knew exactly what that storm was about to do to us. He hung his jacket over a chair, his t-shirt damp enough to cling to him. I turned back to the laundry, trying to keep my hands steady. You're soaked, I said too quickly. I'll dry, he answered, voice quiet. Minutes passed. The rain kept pounding against the windows. The dryer hummed, warm and constant. I could feel him behind me before I saw him. Close, too close. You always smell like this? He asked suddenly, his voice almost a whisper. Like what? He leaned in, his mouth near my ear. Like warm clothes and trouble. I should have laughed, should have stepped away. Instead, I set the sheet down, turned. The look in his eyes wasn't a question anymore. It was an answer, and I didn't ask him for permission. Chapter 7. The first time we didn't pretend. The rain outside was relentless. It wasn't just falling, it was hammering the house. A steady, furious rhythm that made the laundry room feel even smaller, even warmer. Ryan's shirt clung to him, damp at the edges, the fabric darkening where the rain had soaked through. My hands twitched, not because I wanted to push him away, God, no, but because I wanted to grab him, and I knew if I did, there'd be no going back. He stepped closer. The The dryer hummed between us like a third heartbeat. My back was against the folding counter now, and I didn't even remember moving there. "You gonna tell me to leave?" he asked. Voice low. It wasn't cocky. It wasn't playful. It was careful, like he already knew the answer but wanted to hear me say it. I shook my head. Slow, barely more than an inch of movement. That was all it took. His hand came to rest on my jaw, warm and firm, his thumb brushing the corner of my mouth. I should have been thinking about my husband, about my marriage, about all the years I had invested in that life, but all I could think about was how good it felt to be touched like I mattered again when his mouth met mine. It wasn't a crash. It was slow, dangerously slow, like he was tasting something he wasn't sure he was allowed to have but knew he'd never forget. The kiss deepened. I felt his other hand slide to my lower back, pulling me against him. The heat between us was instant, like it had been waiting under the surface for weeks, just looking for an excuse to ignite. The hum of the dryer grew louder in my head, almost drowning out the sound of the rain. My hands found the back of his neck. I felt the tension in his shoulders, the way he was holding himself back even now, and I didn't want him to. I pressed closer, tilting my hips until the space between us disappeared. His breath hitched just once and then his restraint was gone. He lifted me onto the counter without a word. The metal was warm from the dryer underneath, and the vibration sent a shock through me. His hands were on my thighs now, firm, sliding higher with every slow, deliberate pass. "Tell me to stop," he whispered again, and again. I didn't. Instead, I kissed him harder, because the truth was, I didn't just want this. I needed it. Needed the way his touch made me feel like a woman again. Not just a wife. When he finally pushed inside me, it was deep enough to steal my breath. I gasped against his mouth, my fingers gripping the edge of the counter. It hurt not much, just enough to remind me this was real. And God help me, I didn't want it to stop. The rhythm we found wasn't frantic, it was controlled, deliberate, like every movement was a promise neither of us was brave enough to say out loud. I could feel the dryer rattling beneath me, the storm outside, my own heartbeat, everything colliding into one unbearable, perfect moment. When it was over, we didn't speak, not right away. He just rested his forehead against mine, his breath warm and uneven, and for the first time in years, I felt full, not just in my body, but in the hollow parts of me I'd stopped believing anyone could reach. I knew what we'd done, I knew what it meant, but I also knew, deep down, this wasn't the last time, because hunger like that, it doesn't go away. It only grows. Chapter 8. The taste that lingered after Ryan left that night. The house felt different, not just quiet, hollow, like he'd taken something with him when he walked out the door. And I wasn't sure if I'd ever get it back. I should have been shaking with guilt. I should have been replaying every vow I'd just broken, but instead, I was replaying his mouth on mine, the heat of his hands, the way he'd looked at me like I was worth wanting. I didn't sleep much. Every creak of the house made me think of him. Every gust of wind against the window sounded like the storm had come back for me. And when I finally drifted off, my dreams weren't dreams at all. They were memories. Memories that made my chest tighten and my body ache in ways my husband hadn't in years. By morning, the guilt did show up. It sat in my stomach like a stone, but underneath it sharper, more dangerous was the craving. Because one taste wasn't enough. It never is. Chapter 9. Making excuses to see him. Next time I saw him, it wasn't by accident. I told myself I needed to ask about the garage door again, some noise I'd heard. But really, I just needed to see if the spark was still there, or if I'd imagined it. It wasn't gone. It was worse. He stood in the driveway, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. The sun was bright, but I couldn't look away from him, and he didn't look away from me either. For a long moment, we didn't speak. The air between us felt thick enough to hold. When I finally opened my mouth, my voice came out softer than I meant. "Door's still acting up." He smirked just barely. "I'll take a look." And I knew from the way he said it that he wasn't talking about the door. Chapter 10. The places we stole. It started small after that. Moments stolen in the middle of the day. Conversations that sounded innocent if anyone overheard them but carried undercurrents that could drown us both. Sometimes it was his hand brushing mine when no one was watching. Sometimes it was the way he'd stand just close enough that our arms touched. And once, God, I'll never forget it, he leaned in behind me while I was bent over the trunk of my car, his breath warm against my neck, his voice a low growl in my ear. "You keep looking at me like that," he said, "and I'm not gonna wait for the next storm. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything else. I told my husband I had a headache and went to bed early, but I didn't sleep. I just lay there in the dark, replaying Ryan's words over and over, each time letting them sink deeper into me. The lines we'd crossed in the laundry room weren't the last. They were just the beginning. Chapter 11. The game we started playing, it didn't take long before we stopped pretending. And no more the doors broken or the gutters clogged. No more excuses. Ryan would just show up. Sometimes I'd open the door and he'd already be inside, leaning against the hallway wall like he owned the place. And the thing was, I liked it. I liked that he didn't ask permission anymore. The way he'd look at me when I walked into the room like his hands were already on me made my knees feel unsteady. It was a dangerous kind of hunger, not the kind that whispers, the kind that roars. We started playing a game. We never said when we'd meet. We just knew. A glance from across the street, a text with no words, just an empty message bubble, the faintest knock at the side door. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen making coffee when I felt him behind me. I hadn't even heard the door open. His hands slid around my waist, pulling me back against him. I could feel how hard he already was, and it sent a shock straight through me. Kitchen's risky, I whispered, even though we both knew that was a lie. That's the point, he said. He bent me over the counter without another word. The sound of my own mug tipping over and shattering on the floor barely registered because his hand was already in my hair, his other one on my hip, pulling me back into him. I should have been terrified my husband would walk in, but instead, all I could think was how much I wanted him to, how much I wanted to be caught, just to see the look on his face when he realized he'd already lost me. Chapter 12. The addiction. After that day, we stopped caring about the rules. The back of his truck, my car in the grocery store parking lot, the shed behind my house in the middle of the night, anywhere we could steal a few minutes, we took them, and each time, it was like we were testing how far we could push before the world caught on. The truth? I didn't even feel guilty anymore. That part of me had gone quiet, numb. All I felt now was the pull toward him, the craving that kept me awake at night, restless and aching. Sometimes, lying next to my husband, I'd close my eyes and imagine it was Ryan beside me instead. The way his skin smelled like cedar and gasoline, the way his voice dipped lower when he was about to lose control. It wasn't just cheating anymore. It was choosing him in my head 1,000 times over before I ever touched him again. Chapter 13. The first close call. First time we almost got caught was a Thursday afternoon. He was in my bedroom. We'd just finished, the sheets still tangled around our legs, when I heard a car in the driveway. My husband, panic shot through me. Ryan was halfway to the window before I even said his name. I grabbed his arm. No, bathroom, go. We barely had time to pull the covers up before the front door opened. Babe, my husband called from downstairs. Up here, I shouted, my voice almost a steady. Ryan stayed hidden in the bathroom, silent, while my husband came into the bedroom and kissed me on the forehead. I could still feel Ryan's sweat cooling on my skin. My husband didn't notice, or maybe he didn't want to. When he left to bring in the groceries, Ryan slipped out the back. Neither of us spoke for hours afterward. But that night, when I texted him, the only thing I wrote was, next time, no hiding. Chapter 14. Slipping. The more we did it, the more careless we became. At first, we'd plan everything, where to meet, when to leave, how to cover our tracks. But soon, it was just whenever we wanted, wherever we wanted. And that's when the mistake started. One night, I came home with my hair still damp from his shower. My husband looked at me, confused. You shower at your sister's? He asked. I lied without even thinking. Yeah, the water pressure's better. He nodded, but something in his eyes lingered a second too long. Another time, Ryan's hoodie ended up in the back seat of my car. I told myself I'd grab it later, but forgot. When my husband saw it, I said it was from a donation box. The lies were easy at first, too easy, and that scared me because I could feel myself getting better at them. Chapter 15. The fight that changed everything. It happened on a rainy Saturday. My husband and I had been arguing all morning, stupid things, little sparks that kept catching, but then he said something I didn't expect, something that made the air in the room go still. You're not here anymore, he said quietly. Not really. Your body's here, but your head's somewhere else. For a second, I thought my heart had stopped, because he was right, and part of me wondered if he knew exactly where my head had been, and with who. I wanted to deny it, to push back. Instead, I just walked out of the room, straight into the rain, straight toward Ryan's truck parked across the street. When I slid into the passenger seat, he didn't ask what was wrong, he just started driving. Chapter 16. The motelway ended up at a motel off the highway, the kind of place with flickering neon signs and rooms that smelled faintly of cigarettes no matter how much they'd been clean. It should have felt cheap. It should have felt wrong. But when Ryan locked the door behind us and pushed me up against it, I realized something. I didn't care about the cost anymore. It wasn't just the sex that night. It was the way he stayed afterward. His hand on my thigh, talking about nothing and everything. It was the way I fell asleep on his chest, knowing full well my husband was probably pacing the living room, wondering where I was, and it was the way I didn't feel guilty about that at all. We woke before sunrise. Ryan kissed me hard, like he was trying to memorize the shape of my mouth. Then he said something I wasn't ready for. One day, we're not gonna have to hide. The words sat heavy between us, because deep down, I knew they weren't true. But I didn't say that, I just kissed him again. Chapter 17. Cracks in the Discover. The next few weeks, my husband started watching me more closely. I could feel his eyes on me when I checked my phone, when I came home later than usual, when I smiled for no reason. The mask I'd been wearing was starting to slip. Ryan noticed too. "You're jumpy," he said one afternoon, brushing my hair back from my face. "I'm fine," I lied. He didn't push it, but I could tell he was thinking the same thing I was, that we were running out of room to move. Chapter 18. The Messagate happened on a Tuesday, a normal, boring, nothing special Tuesday. I was in the kitchen making dinner when my husband's phone buzzed on the counter. I shouldn't have looked. I never looked, but I saw Ryan's name, and I froze. The message was short, 2 words, "Miss you." For a second, my mind couldn't make sense of it. Then the blood drained from my face. That wasn't my phone. That wasn't my message. Ryan had texted my husband. I felt sick. Was it a mistake? A twisted joke? Or was he telling him on purpose? I stood there staring at the screen until I heard the front door open. My husband walked in smiling, until he saw my face. "What is it?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just handed him the phone. Chapter 19. The silence before the storm. He read it, then looked at me. The quiet that followed was worse than yelling could ever be. His jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists at his sides, and I swear, for a moment, I thought he might hit me, but he didn't. He just said, "Sit down." I sat. He stood over me, and the questions came, one after another. How long? How many times? Where? And the worst one, why? I didn't have an answer that would save me. So I didn't try. Chapter 20. The air valve. 15 minutes later, headlights swept across the living room wall. Ryan's truck. My husband opened the door before he even knocked. They stood there, staring at each other, both breathing hard. For a second, I thought Ryan might leave, but instead, he stepped inside. And no one spoke. Not at first. It was just 3 people standing in a room thick with the weight of every lie, every touch, every moment we thought we'd gotten away with. And then, my husband laughed. Not the kind of laugh that means something's funny. The kind that means something inside him has snapped. "You can have her," he said to Ryan, "but just know, she's not yours. She never was. She never will be." Chapter 21. Shatter. The words hung in the air like glass about to fall. Ryan stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "She chose me." My husband's eyes flicked to me, sharp and accusing. "Did you?" he asked. It wasn't just a question, it was a demand for the truth, stripped bare. And the worst part, I didn't know how to answer. Because yes, I had chosen Ryan. In moments. In bed sheets and whispered promises. But I had also chosen my husband in name, in paper, in the house we'd built together. I had been living into worlds, and now, both were crumbling at my feet. My husband turned away, pacing. Then, without warning, he grabbed the framed wedding photo off the wall and hurled it across the room. The glass shattered against the floor, spraying tiny shards that glittered under the lamplight. That sound sharp. Final felt like the exact moment my marriage ended. Chapter 22. The ultimatum. Leave, my husband said, his voice so calm it scared me. He wasn't talking to Ryan, he was talking to me. I froze. Where am I supposed to? I don't care, he cut in. Just get out of my house before I stop talking and start doing something I can't take back. Ryan reached for my hand. His grip was warm, steady, but I could feel my husband's eyes burning into my back as we walked toward the door. Every step felt like stepping off a cliff, Chapter 23. The motel again. Me ended up back at the same motel where this whole thing had felt so alive, only this time, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like exile. Ryan wrapped his arms around me that night, but I couldn't stop shaking. The air between us had shifted. I wasn't the woman sneaking away for stolen moments anymore. I was the woman who had been thrown out, stripped of the thrill, left with only the mess. Around I woke up and found Ryan sitting at the edge of the bed, smoking in the dark. He didn't look at me when he said, "You know this isn't gonna last, right?" The words hit harder than anything my husband had said, because I knew he was right. Chapter 24. The disappearance. 6 days later, Ryan was gone. No call, just gone. I checked the usual places. Nothing. It was like he had been erased from my life in one clean sweep, and all I was left with was the silence. Chapter 25. The empty house. I went back to the house one night, just to see. The lights were on. Through the window, I saw my husband sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. But on the counter, where my favorite mug used to be, there was a different one, a floral one, and in the corner, a woman's purse I didn't recognize. It hit me then I hadn't just lost him, I'd been replaced. Chapter 26. The final realization. People think the worst part of betrayal is the moment you get caught. It's not. The worst part is weeks later, when the person you blew up your life for isn't there anymore, when you realize you destroyed everything for nothing. Sometimes I still drive past that motel. The neon sign still flickers. Room 12 still has that crooked number plate, and for a second, I can almost feel his hands again. The rush, the danger. But then the light changes, and I drive away, because the truth is, the past doesn't follow you. It just waits, and when you look back, it's still there smiling like it never left. Chapter 27. Ghost roads. Nights became my enemy, because at night, the world slows down enough for the ghosts to catch up. Streetlights blur past my car windows as I drive aimlessly, always ending up on the same roads we used to take. It's muscle memory now. The left turn toward the motel, the right toward the diner where Ryan would smirk at me over black coffee like he knew exactly what I was about to do. I keep telling myself I'm not going to stop, but I always slow down. I always look. The motel's neon sign flickers, buzzing, like it's barely alive. Room 12's curtains are drawn shut. Someone else is in there now, maybe tangled in the same mistakes I made. I want to warn them. I want to scream, "Don't open the door. Don't let him in." But I keep driving, because I know it wouldn't matter. Some lessons, you only learn by bleeding. Chapter 28. Photographs in the foray. Found an old showbox in the back of my closet last week. Inside, photographs, ticket stubs, motel receipts. I sat on the floor for hours, flipping through pieces of my own undoing. One picture stopped me cold. It wasn't of Ryan. It was of my husband. We were at the beach. Years ago, before everything. He had his arm around me, his sunglasses pushed up into his hair, smiling like he believed in forever. I burned it, not out of hate, out of mercy, because some smiles aren't meant to be remembered once you know how. The story ends. Chapter 29. The mirror. People think infidelity changes you because you lose someone. That's not it. It changes you because you lose yourself. I used to recognize the woman in my mirror. Now, I see a stranger. Eyes to tired, smile to rehearsed. Some mornings, I stand there and try to imagine the version of me who never opened that motel door. She still exists somewhere, in another timeline, but not here. Chapter 30. The last Masaga. 3 months after Ryan vanished, I got a text from an unknown number. "You still think about me?" No name. No hello. But I knew. I stared at it for hours. I thought about every lonely night, every mistake, every lie, and then I deleted it. Not because I didn't think about him, but because I finally understood thinking about someone and wanting them are two very different things. Chapter 31. My apology to the Silenci. Used to hate the silence. Now I treat it like an old friend. It's the only thing that doesn't judge me, doesn't remind me, doesn't pull me back into the storm. It just sits with me. And maybe that's what I deserve. Not punishment, not forgiveness, just the quiet, final scene. To the ones watching, if you've made it here, to the end, then you're different. You're not just a passerby looking for drama. You're the kind of person who feels the weight of every word, who knows that sometimes the scariest monsters don't live under the bed. They live in our own choices. You didn't just listen to my story, you carried it with me, and for that, I'm grateful. Because maybe that's why I told it, not to be forgiven, not to be understood, but to hand someone else the match before they Strike it.so to you, the one still here, I see you. I value you. And I hope you never have to learn the hard way that some doors, once opened, can never be closed.